All right, I think it's recording now. Again, hi everyone. Welcome to the final session in our SQL workshop series, co-hosted by Foster Marketing Association and the Data and Analytics Club. Today, we're going to be learning about some more advanced topics covering the case when statement, subqueries, and something called a wildcard match. Don't worry if you don't know what any of that means. I don't either. But our wonderful speaker for today, Vivin, is going to walk us through all of those new skills. Okay, little DL about Vivin. He's an extremely experienced SQL user with over 5 years of experience as a data analyst. He used SQL all the time pre-MBA, and while it wasn't a requirement for his internship, he definitely says it gave him an edge while recruiting. So without further ado, I will let him take it away.
Thanks, Christine. I want to give a big shout out to Christine for actually running the series on behalf of both the clubs. So yeah, welcome all. Today will be the final session, and I will be covering a little bit of complex topics in SQL. And when I say complex, it's not, I'm going to, before that, I'm going to start sharing the screen. Yeah. So when I talk about complex SQL queries or functions, this is not going to be like code that is like 100 lines long or it takes like hours for you to write. But rather, this is going to be a little advanced codes that you can learn quite easily. It's easy to use and it's so powerful to use. It can definitely save you tons of time. And also like it's definitely a really great knowledge for an MBA graduate to have. So having said that, I want to start off with giving a little bit of an example from my internship. So these are some of the types of codes that types of problems that I had to solve during my internship. And like on first look, this might seem a little complex, but to be honest, it takes about 5 minutes to write and maybe another 5 minutes to run. But if you were to like wait for a business analyst or a data analyst for you to give the same data, it's going to take you maybe a day based on their priorities. So that's why I feel like these are pretty easy to learn and so important for you to have, and it definitely gives you an edge during your internship. So I understand this might be a little complex. So if you have any questions, please feel free to like put in the chat, raise your hands, or even unmute and answer the question and ask the questions. So I'm going to keep it a little light, just 3 topics that we're going to cover. And so we have plenty of time for Q&A as well. So for these examples, I will be covering the codes by the end of the session. And if there's enough time, but if not, you can always reach out to me to ask questions about this, how to solve these problems. So for today, we will be covering 3 statements, the case when statement, subqueries, and something called as a wildcard match. So we will be actually working it out while we'll be practicing during this session. So I would strongly suggest that you open the second link, which is a SQL editor where you can practice those SQL codes. So this is on a website called W3 Schools, and the data and the tables that we're going to be using is all from this particular website. It's a very easy to use website as well. And we will be covering the SQL codes for the examples in the previous slide. All right, before I start, any questions? All right, I'm just going to send the link as well to the workbench. Okay, so the first topic that we're going to talk about is the case when statement. So the case when statement is a conditional statement. If anyone had done a little bit of coding, even in your undergrad or your school, you know what an if-else statement is. Basically, you check for a condition. If the data matches that condition, you return a value. So that is the same thing that we are trying to achieve using a case when statement. So what it does is it looks into the data that you have in the tables, sees if there's a match to the condition that you are specifying. And if there is a match, against that particular row, it will return a value in a different column. It'll create a new column and it'll enter the value. So if you've attended the first session, you know that there's a statement called as a select statement, which is like the starting statement that you write in a SQL code. So this is the select statement along with pulling up other column names. So I'll give you the basic syntax and then I'll walk you through an example of how to do it. So this is the basic statement. So I have 3 conditions here. It depends upon the number of conditions that you want to have in your codes. So if you want to have just one condition and then maybe flag everything else as others or null, you can just stop at just one case when So the important things that you have to always write is the case part, which indicates that you are starting a case when statement. There's a when, which is the condition with the one that precedes the condition. You say this, when this happens, then the result. And always you include the end statement. So there are three parts to this case when statement that you will have to change in your codes. The first one is the condition. The condition always includes a column name. Like for instance, if you have a data which has one of the column names as price, and if you want to check if you want to flag all those rows which have price greater than $20, you put in that condition part case when price greater than $20. So that's the first part that you have to put in your case when condition. The second one is the result. So the result would be if there is a match, if there is a row which has price greater than $20, what should you return? What should you enter as a separate column, as a value in a separate column? So this can be either a number or a string. For instance, I've given an example that it says string, it says price greater than $20. And then the last one is the result for, which in this case is what comes after the else statement. So the else is just to cover all the different conditions. For instance, if you want just to flag price greater than, if there's price greater than $20, you want to flag it as price greater than $20. And for the rest of them, you want to just say price less than or equal to $20. You can just put that in the else statement. And this part is actually optional. You can ignore the else. If you do ignore the else, what happens is if there is no match for a particular row, what SQL does is it just fills in a blank value. So this is the basic syntax for what a case when statement looks like. I will walk you through an example for you to see it better. Karan, you have a question?
Yeah, thanks, Vivin. So I think you mentioned you could enter a column name in the then statement.
Yes.
So does that mean it's pulling information from that column?
Yeah. So for instance, if you say that case when price greater than 20, then order ID. So in the new column that's created, it'll enter the order ID for that particular row. So for instance, if there's an order ID column, existing order ID column, and there's a price column, and rows which have price greater than 20, it'll fill in the order ID. You can do this like maybe if you want just to flag those, just to pull those list of order IDs where there's a price greater than 20. So that's an example that you can use. But mostly people don't use a column name. They just put in the condition or put in the result that they want to see. So I just put in that so that you can know that that is still an option for you to do. All right.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. So let's take an example. So let's take an example that we want to flag all the products in the products tables, which is there. You can find it in the W3 Schools website that are priced at or about $20. So to do this, I'm going to open the workbench. And so this is the table that we're working with. If you can see, there is a price column, which shows like what is the price for each product that's there. So what we want to do is we want to just flag the products which have a price greater than or equal to 20. So what you would do is you would select, maybe you want to select just the product ID and product name from the column, from the tables. So you can put product, select product name, which is basically selecting the product name that you want to pull up. So now this is where you put the case when statement. Case when price is greater than or greater than equal to 20, then you can just put price greater than 20. So you can just put, so what this does is for each row, it'll check if the price is greater than 20. And if so, it'll add another column which says that with the flag saying that price is greater than 20. And you always, in order to indicate that this is the end of the case when statement, you put in an end statement over there. So when you run this code, when you run this code, what happens is for against each row, which each product name, it shows you if there's a product that's greater than 20. Actually, I can pull in the price for you guys to see it. I'm sorry. There's one missing. Yeah. So if there's a price that's greater than or equal to 20, it would flag it as saying price is greater than 20. Now, if you notice that there are rows where it's not greater than or equal to 20, so it says blank. You can either leave it as blank if you want it, or you can say else price less than 20. Now, when you run this, what happens is if there's a price which is less than 20, it just marks it as price less than 20. Now, if you've seen the codes which Kevin wrote or Saradik wrote in the last session, they always add an as clause, which tells you that what should we name this new column as. In this case, since I didn't add an as statement, it should just put in whatever function that we're trying to match here. So it just puts in case when. It doesn't look good. So what you can say is as price tag. So what it does is it just names this new column as price tag. Does it make sense? All right, so if you want to maybe say you want to add more conditions to it, you can always add more conditions after the when clause. So when price less than 20, you could say then price less than 20. Sorry. Yeah, else others. So in this case, since we have covered both price greater than or equal to 20 and less than or equal to 20, there would not be any other entry. But if in case you want to just include price greater than 20, price greater than 20, and less than 20, and when you run this, what happens is you would get the same results, but when there is a price equal to 20, it just flags it as other. So this is the third condition, which is the else statement that we have included here. And again, if you can, this is an optional statement, the else part. If you ignore it, this would just show up as a blank value. So do you have any questions before we could jump into a problem that I want to maybe ask you guys to solve? All right. So this is the code that you could write for a problem that you have like this, and you would get the output as such. So you would have the product name, you would have the price, and you also have the price flag, which is the newer column that was created on account of using the case when statement. So now I would want to practice. I'm going to give you 5 minutes or 3 to 5 minutes to practice this code. So if possible, can you write a code that selects order IDs and quantity from the order details table and flag the orders where quantity is between 1 and 10, which is including 1 and 10 as 1 to 10, quantity between 11 and 20 as 11 to 20, and the rest as 20 plus, and set this new column name as quantity flag. So I'm going to give it just a couple of minutes before you guys want to maybe try this code. And if you have any questions, please raise your hand and we could walk this through. It seems like no questions, so we can try it out. Yeah. So I will show you the answer how to put it. What Raisul has put into the chat is exactly right. So if you want to include every number between 1 and 10, you could either you can do two ways. One, you could say where quantity is greater than or equal to 1 and quantity less than or equal to 10, which is one way to do it. Still works fine. Or you could use this statement called as a between, which includes all 1 to 10, including 1 and 10. So this is the simple code that you can write for a case where you have to flag those ones for those rows which are between 1 and 10 or between 11 and 12. And if it's not, you could just flag it as 20 plus. Before I move on to the next topic, I want to just pause and see if anyone has any questions regarding this. If you want me to go a little bit slow, you can just let me know, and I could probably take that into consideration. Are we all good to go? Maybe give a thumbs up or something. Good, already start. All right. Okay, so that was the case when statement. So that's something what you call as a conditional statement. And if you remember the example that I initially put up for as an example from my internship, where your sales are between X and X, then you flagged as something. The case when statement can be a super tool to do that. You can also do that in Excel. I mean, most people prefer to do it in Excel, but during my internship, as an example, you had like tables which had over 1 million rows, and Excel cannot handle that. So in that cases, your SQL case and statement is a really powerful tool that can give you the answers really quickly, and it's going to be super helpful for you in your internship. So the next one that we're going to talk about is called as a subquery. So a query is just a SQL code. So what this essentially is a code within a code. So basically what you have is you take a SQL code, you put it inside another SQL code, and that's a subquery. And you can have like, different layers and layers of SQL codes. Like, you could have like multiple subqueries within one query. You have like one within another. And usually these are used to reference values from another table that you data in the current table. And like, you probably learned joins in the last session from Saradik. Sometimes people don't like to use joins. They would just want to use subqueries. It's probably easier to understand. So that's where subqueries can be super powerful. And these things can be used in multiple places. Unlike the case when statement where you used it in the select statement, you could use it within the where statement, which is what you use to filter. The from statement, which is basically like the tables that we want to get the data from, or even in the select statement. I'm going to show you how those three statements would differ, and before getting into an example. So like I said, the first one is in the select statement. So whatever is within the red parentheses is what a SQL statement, a SQL subquery is. So if you take a look at this, from the select to the table 2, if you just take that in isolation, you can see that that in itself is a SQL code. So you take that and you put it into another SQL code that gives you your subquery. So in this case, what I'm doing is from second table, I am counting the number of entries in a column called column 3, and I'm just using that number as an entry into the other SQL code that I'm running. So what this would give you is, for select the column 1, the output would be column 1 from table 1, column 2 from table 1, and the number, which is like the count from table 2 as CNT. So this is in the select statement. This would be much clearer once I go through an example. There's also the from statement, where you just, if you want to like maybe do another level of calculation after the first step of the SQL code, you write the first SQL code within this parentheses, and then you do a separate count or separate aggregation or separate operation above that in an outer query. And also you have the where statement, which this is the most commonly used one. I use it a multiple times during my internship. And this is where you use it as a proxy for your joins. So basically what we would do is select the column 1 and column 2 from the table 1, where column 3 in the list of entries that we pull from from the table 2. Now I'll explain what this in statement is and how this works in an example, just to make it clear. So select, for instance, if you have a solve a problem that we need all order IDs and product IDs from this table called order details, which was sold by an employee ID 3. Now, if you take a look at the data that we have, the employee ID 3 is not present in the table called order details. So I'll show you this table so it's clearer. So if you take a look at the order details table, we have the order detail ID, the order ID, product ID, quantity, but there is no information as to which employee sold this ID. And if you go to the table called orders, you have the order ID and also the employee ID associated with that. So what you would do is you would first need the list of all the orders that have been sold by employee ID. So that's a pretty simple thing that we've done in previous exercises. So you simply select order IDs, sorry, order ID from orders where employee ID equals 3. So what this would do is this would select a list of all the orders from that table, which was sold by the employee ID. Now we can use this list of data as a filter for the table that order details that we have. So this in statement that I was talked about is mostly used in the where clause, where you say that, instead of check if, say for instance, you want to check if the order is in either A or B or C or D. So you have a list of orders that you want to check if the particular order is in that list. So you could either write it as where order ID equals A or order ID equals B or so on, or you could just say that where order ID in, and you just include a list of order IDs in a parentheses. So the same thing can be used when you think about a subquery. So basically this SQL code that we have pulls the list of orders that was sold by employee ID 3, and we can use this as a filter for the order details table. So we can keep this separately. So we can select order ID, product ID from. So we need to get this from this table called order details. Now we want to filter this list to just the orders that have been sold by the employee ID 3. So what you would do is we have the list of orders that have been sold by employee ID 3. We just need to use that as a filter. So what you would do is where order ID in, and you give the list as form of a subquery. So basically how this works is it first runs the query which is within the parentheses. So it basically first runs this. It'll pull all the list of orders from this table called orders where employee ID equals 3, and puts that list within the where clause as a filter. So we would select order ID, product ID from order details table, where the order ID in is in the list of order IDs that we have pulled from the second table. So when you run this, this would give you just the order IDs and the product IDs of those orders that have been sold by employee ID 3. Now I know this might seem a little confusing, so if you have any questions, I'm going to pause here. Just raise your hands, or maybe you unmute and you can ask the question. Well, I'm being much clearer than I expected, but all right. So if you guys don't have any questions, all right, Mrinal.
Hey, Vivin, I'm just slightly lost. I think I was
Yeah.
with the joint aspect. So
Mhm.
can you just go over what the relationship is?
Yeah, sure. So in the last session, what you learned about joins. So basically, if you want to maybe filter down for the orders which have like the employee ID as 3, what you would do is so you'd probably select all the different columns from the table 1. You would select the columns from the table 2. So in table 2, you would have like maybe order ID and employee ID. And then you would join those two tables based on order ID. And then you would filter the entire table for where employee ID equals 3. So basically, in that case, something like this: A dot order ID, A dot product ID as A. You would join this with, sorry, 1 second. Yeah, so you would join inner join orders on A dot order ID equals B dot order ID. So, and then you would say where B dot employee ID equals 3. So basically what you're doing is you're joining those two tables on a common key, which is the order ID in this case. And then you're just filtering out all the detail, all the column or the rows where the employee ID equals 3. So this would give you the same result. If you run it, it would give, I'm sorry. Did I miss something? One minute. right, so for some reason it's not working. Unknown ID. All right, yeah, oh, sorry. Yeah, this, sometimes you miss the case, I mean, the cases of this thing, it works up. So basically what it did was it joined those two tables, and it started filtering down those date or those entries where it found an employee ID equals 3. So this is how you accomplish the same thing using a join. Now, some people find joins to be a little bit more complex. So in order to circumvent that is when you use a subquery. And it basically achieves the same thing. There's not much of a difference in performance unless you have multiple joins in your codes. But other than that, this pretty much achieves the same thing. So that's why I said this could be used as a replacement for your joins. Does that make sense, Miro?
Yeah, it actually does. So essentially here you're just pulling data without joining the tables, whereas they're
Yes.
joining and then pulling. I see.
Yeah. That's right. And yeah, thanks, Karan, for answering that. Yeah, these are just aliases that I'm giving to those two tables. Okay, if you guys are cool with this one, I could give you an example for you to work on. So let's take those two, the table called products table, which has the list of products, product names, product IDs, and stuff. So just pull all the product names where the category is dairy products. So now the category called dairy products is from the table called categories. And just note that the strings are case sensitive. So if you're filtering for dairy products on the table categories, you need to ensure it's in the same case as this. So the D and P are capital. That's how the data is. Now this can, again, like I said, this can be done without subqueries, but for this case, let's just try using that. All right, I'm again going to give you 3 to 5 minutes just to work on that before. And yeah, you can ask me any questions in the meantime. And for this case, I'll probably walk you through how to write the code in the workbench. So moving on to this one. Can you guys see my W3 school screen? Is that correct? Yeah, Karan, you had a question.
I was just trying
to. Okay, yeah, thanks, man.
I hit the wrong.
All right, thanks, man. So the question was select the list of product names from the products table that belong to the category dairy products from the category table. So the first thing that you would have to do is think about writing the inner query first. So which would be select product ID. So product ID is the common column that's been in both the products and the category table. So I can just show you the products table. So there's a product ID column and there's a category ID. The category, you have the category ID in products table and also the same category ID in your category table. So you can use this common column to filter down the list of products from the products table. So what you do is first you need to write the inner query. So you can select category ID from categories where your category name equals dairy products. All right, so this would basically filter down all the category IDs, which is basically in this case, category ID. I am so sorry. Yeah, so this is just filter down the category ID as 4, because there's just one entry for category table. So you use this as your inner query, and in the outer one, you would just put select name from products where category ID in. So basically what it do is the first inner code would run. It would find out that the category that we need is 4, and then it would filter down from the products table by category ID in the list, which in this case is just one item. So it would give you just those items which are dairy products. Do you have any questions before you can move to the next topic? All right, yeah. Again, like I said, you can always achieve this other ways. You can use joins. You could have just manually gone through the category tables, found out that it's 4, and use that as a filter here. But in most cases, when you don't want to hardcode your numbers, you just want to, maybe look up from another table and then, apply that filter for your tables here. So again, this is a really super powerful tool that you use quite often, and it's most probably used in the where statement, because that's where you can try to use that instead of joins. All right, so moving on to the next one. So this, you can see the answer in the slides here. All right, so the last topic that I wanted to cover today is something called as a wildcard match. So basically, you can think of wildcards as replacement for your characters. So as an example, maybe you want to find all the customers whose name starts with M or your name starts with V. In that case, you know that the first letter is V, but the rest of the characters are unknown to you. So you can use these wildcards instead of those remaining characters to say that if anyone that starts with V and the rest of the characters can be anything unknown, you can filter those names out. So you can use this to search for a pattern of strings. In the example that I showed initially, where it said, if the seller name was either bot or test, you need to flag that out. So if you want to find that particular pattern, say bot or test anywhere in the seller name, you can use this wildcards as a replacement for that. And these are used along with a statement called as a like clause. I will again explain what that is. This has not been covered so far, so it's again a really powerful thing that you can that I'll be covering today. And they are usually either used in the select statement or in the where statement. Basically, those places where you want to maybe check for a condition. Like I said, in the select statement, when you use a case when, you could use this wildcards in the case when statement to check for a condition. Or it's the same thing can be done in the where clause when you maybe want to filter down for a pattern. And there are different types of wildcards that you can use. I'm just going to list them out and walk you through each one of them. So for instance, if you use the symbol percentage, so for instance, like I said, if you want to find all the names which start with V, you could just say where the name is like V percentage. So what percentage means is it could be either 0 characters or even 20 characters after V. So if you use this example, if you use BL percentage, it would find every name which has like BL, black, blue, or block in it. Similarly, it goes for this another symbol called as the underscore, which gives you all the inputs which have just a single character in replacement for this character. So basically, if you use h_t, it would give you hot, hat, and hit. So these two are most probably the ones that you would be using. And again, it'll mostly be the percentage that you would be using. But I've also listed down other wildcards that you can use when you're trying to match the characters. So as an example, now say maybe you want to find, like I said, if you want to find a list of all the customers in the customer details table whose name starts with M. And it can be anything like, Mark, Maria, Mary, or even if it's like, say, M from James Bond, you want to find their names. In that case, you would just select the contact name, which is in this case, the customer name, from the customers table where contact name is like. So basically, since you're doing for a pattern match, you use this like statement where it's like M percentage. So like I said, it'll find M. If just the custom name is just M, it'll find that. If it's Mark, it'll find that. If it's Mary, it'll find that. So if you run this code, you would get a list of all the names such as this. So M, it starts with M. It can be anything else after that. It can be just the letter M, or it can be just Maria, or it can be Maria Anders. It will still find you those different names. And it can be used in the opposite way as well. Like if you want to maybe find those customer details whose name ends with an ES. In that case, what you would do is you would just shift the percentage sign to the front of the filter here. So basically, you would put something like select contact name from customers, where contact name is like percentage ES. So in this case, if the name is just ES, it would find it. Or if it's, say, something like Mario Pontes or Jaime Llores, it would find all those list of names. So again, this is another tool that you could use, if you try to do this in Excel with a lot of if and left and right statements, it's going to take you a ton of time. But if you can just use this simple single line of code in your SQL, it would just filter down all the list of entries that would actually match your statement. Christine?
Question from the moderator. Does this match actually have to be case sensitive? Like if you wanted specifically uppercase or lowercase m?
Yes. So one thing that you have to notice, every string that we use as a filter in where clause is case sensitive. Now you can, if say there is a data table which you don't know what the cases are, or maybe there's like multiple different types of cases. Maybe Maria Anders starts with a capital M, Martin Sommer does not start with a capital M. It has a lowercase m. In that case, what you can do is you could use a function called upper or lower around this contact name. So you could say lower bracket contact name. Basically what it does is it changes every entry in the contact name column to a lowercase, and then you can just put lowercase m here. So it just makes sure that every single entry has the same case. Karan?
Yeah. Could we also use an or statement there? Like with the like, can you use an or? So it could be like m percentage, or like capital M percentage, or like small m percentage.
Yeah, so you have to use it twice, which means like you should put it contact name like percentage es, or contact name like. So you need to use the column name twice, because each statement that you're checking in your where clause has to have the column name that you're checking, or you can check if it's like m. So if you do that, it will find all the list of names which either start with m or end with es.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Again, so this was a simple example that I wanted to show, and I want to again open it up for 1 second. Yeah. So I'm going to again open it up for for you guys to work out some of the problems that we have. So let's take a practice question. Find the list of product names from table which come in either boxes or jars. So now if you take a look at the products table, you would see that there is a column called units. Let me show you that column. So unit. So you can see that it either comes in boxes, bottles, jars, or packages. So now, again, like just like the question which Karan had asked, find the list of all the entries which either come in a box or come in a jar. And I can give you like 3 to 5 minutes to work on that. Jump into it. All right. So before I move on to the next topic, I just want to point out that thanks Hardik for pointing out. Apparently, even if you use a lowercase m and a percentage in those like statement, it would still match. So in that case, it's not being case sensitive. But generally, if you're using a string match within your where clause, it would be case sensitive, and it again can change depending upon the tool that you're using. But I would always ask you to check before you write your codes. Right? Does it make sense? Okay, moving to the answer. So it is something simple like select product name unit from products. The unit is like percentage box percentage, which means that there could be either characters before that or characters after that, or no characters at all. So I used a percentage on both the ends because in the examples that we've seen, it showed 12 boxes or it showed a box of 10. So in both the cases, this would match. Or unit like percentage jar percentage. Again, it would see if there's jar anywhere in the string. So even if it's if it's in the starting of the string, if it's just jar, or if it's at the end of the string, it would pull up that entry and it would show you the result. So this is the result. This is the third topic that we had to cover. So we still have a couple 12 minutes before I get into like some of the examples that I showed from the starting of the presentation. If you guys have any questions, just let me know. These 3 things were some of the codes and some of the techniques that I used extensively in my internship. Again, these are not something that people expect MBA grads to know. So you could surely impress people with that. But again, it's super powerful, and I wanted to know if you have any questions before I move on. All right, no questions. And I could just jump into the example that I had. So basically, the first question that we had was, based on the seller's sales, you should add them to 5 different buckets. If it's less than 50K, 50K to 100K, etc., and count the number of sellers in each of the buckets. Now, if you remember the first session, we've learned of the statement called count in your select statement, which basically counts the number of entries which that in the column, and then returns an integer number which shows you how many number of entries match that particular count. So in this case, we want to ensure that the output looks something like, for each different bucket, what are the number of sellers that we have. So the code would look something like this. Now, on like first glance, it looks a little big, but it's pretty simple when you just read it line by line. So the first thing that you have to do is, for each different entry, you are adding a case when statement to determine if the sale lies between the range that we are determining. So basically, you would say when sales less than 50,000, then flag it as 50K. Between this and this, flag it as 50K to 100K, and so on. So you have 5 different buckets, which the last one being the greater than 1 million. And you would say that end this as sales bucket. So this, what it would do is, for each entry in the data, it would create a column called sales bucket, and it would flag it as if it's less than 50K, if it's between 50K to 100K, and so on. And the second one that we want to run is, we want to count the number of sellers in each of against each of those buckets. So the count would give you the seller IDs, and what distinct does is, it would count the number of unique seller IDs. Again, this goes back to the first session which Kevin taught us. So basically, if there are the same seller ID that has been listed 10 times for in the table, the count would just give you, for that seller ID, it will give you 10 numbers. But if you put it as count distinct, it will just return that entire seller as 1. So what we would do is, we would count the number of distinct seller IDs from this table called seller sales. Now, I'm not sure if you learned what a group by statement is. So the group by is what you want it to be aggregated by. So for instance, if you want to aggregate the number of sellers by month, you would select month, count of distinct seller IDs as sellers, and you would group it by the month. So that would give you the output data level. Now, you have to note that anything in the select statement which is not an aggregation function, which means it's not a count, it's not a sum, it's not an average, should be included in the group by statement if it does not have to throw, or else it will throw an error. It will say that the column name sales bucket is not a part of the group by. So say, for instance, you have like 10 different columns that you're selecting, and there's just one aggregation. The group by statement would have to include all the 10 columns with excluding the aggregation statement. So in this case, your output would look something like sales bucket. So basically, it is grouping by this particular column, which is sales bucket 50K to 50K to 100K, and it will count the number of sellers against each of those buckets. Now, again, if you want to maybe change this, and if you run it in a different way, you would find a different list of items here. If you want to maybe just get, like, say, for instance, like the example that I gave by month, it will give you a list of months, and it will group the number of sellers by each month. Now this, I know it might have gone too fast, so let me know if you have any questions. Yeah, Karan.
I just had a general syntax question. So around sales bucket, we didn't put any quotes. Is that, yeah. but it is a string, right? So is it just because it has as before it, it doesn't need it? It doesn't need them, or? Yeah,
so for column names, you don't need to put a quotes in outside those column names. So this is a column name that you're creating. In that case, you don't need to put a column name. Again, as sellers, this is a column name that we're creating, so you don't need to put a quotes around that.
Okay, got it. But if we do add quotes,
yeah,
it's going to show up with quotes.
Yeah, I actually forgot. Let me just try that. Let me go back to.
I'm just asking because I feel like that's an easy way to make a mistake somewhere, and then if you just always put it around a string.
So I think it would return an error, but let me just check it out. So if you select product name as product name, yeah, it doesn't matter in this case. It just puts it as product name.
Cool, thank you.
All right, that's a great question. Any other questions, or can move to the next one? Yeah. Actually, we just have 6 minutes left, and it might take a little bit of more time for me to go through this example because it includes a list of all the things that we have learned so far. It has select, it has subqueries, it has inner joins and stuff. So probably if you guys can go through this at your own pace and just email me if you have any questions on that. But I think it would take more than like at least 10 minutes for me to explain the entire thing. So I would move on to the next topic, like just the final conclusion that we had. So I want to just give you some tips that you want to think about when you're writing codes. This includes for anything that we've learned so far in the 3 sessions. So practice writing pseudocodes. So pseudocodes are just a representative code. It just writes down the logic. So before you start writing any SQL code, just think through the problem, see how you would solve the problem, find out the logic, and just put down the logic on paper in your own language. Maybe you could just say, I want to select these columns from this table where the filter sounds something like this. So you can just write it in plain English, even if you want that. So a pseudocode is just like a logic that you want to write down. So write that down first before you start jumping into the codes, because that gives you a good practice about not just code writing, but it could just help you jog the your logic as well. And you can always Google syntax. You can always Google particular functions from for SQL, but the logic is something that you should always come up with. So always start practice with writing pseudocodes. The second tip I have is, I know we taught a lot about complex codes, but try to avoid writing them. One thing is, you see quite often, like even when I joined my internship, when I got a code from another person, it was too complex for me to go through and understand. So again, if you are writing complex codes and you are sharing it with someone else, they might have some trouble finding understanding that. So as much as possible, try avoiding writing them. Write it however you understand it. Write it in the most simplest forms, and that would be easy for you to later debug it or even share it with someone else. And again, like we've been saying this, you can use these 3 websites for to get a ton of information. So you can just Google them, and there's Stack Overflow, which gives you a ton of good information, and W3 Schools as well. A few more things that I didn't get to cover, but I'm sure would be helpful is something called as the window functions. I've included links to lectures and practice codes in the deck that I've shared. So you have window functions, and you also have date functions. Date functions is something that you might use quite often. Like, if the date is in the last 30 days, or if it's in the last 1 year, how would you use that? So again, these 2 things are something that you might probably use. So I would encourage you to go through that. That is all that I had for today, and I'm open to answering any questions that you have.
Thank you everyone so much for joining. We will be sending out the recording in the Data and Analytics Club Slack channel. So hope everyone enjoyed it and learned a lot. And please feel free to email Vivin or me if you have any feedback or questions. Thank you so much.